We've just had a dramatic time for a World of Warcraft expansion ending. Well, not really the ending. There is still an epilogue for Shadowlands, but hey, that raid end was a little bit funky. I was thinking though, how do all of these expansion endings actually rank up? Thing is, I've been here for every single World of Warcraft expansion ending ever. So let's go through them in chronological order, let's see how they stack up, and basically what the crack is for the endings of World of Warcraft. And by the way, if you'd like to support what we do, the best place to do that is, of course, over on Patreon, where we have got real yummy. It's Hunter month for March. I mean, the Hunter class card, I love it. It is on my desk. Jess completely nailed it. Also, the pin is an epic fucking Kraken this time round, which is really cool. And yeah, that supports everything we do. Helps the game dev, helps the YouTube team, and you get cool stuff in return. So that's the crack there. You can check it out down below. And with that, let's dive into the WoW expansions. The Burning Crusade is strange. I mean, from what came before, Anchorage and Naxxramas were incredible thematic beasts in that vanilla narrative, but neither of them felt like an ending. You know, vanilla just kind of ended and TBC began. Now, some of these things would slowly change with TBC. They had a lot of story to get through in the Burning Crusade, and although Illidan felt like the ultimate villain, even though you didn't see that much of him, the ultimate villain was in fact the Legion. Everyone was a puppet on their strings, either literally or through fear of what the Legion could do. In the end, the Burning Crusade sparked demon lore that would end years later in the Legion expansion. But the Isle of Kel'Danas, while beautiful, felt very far away from Outland. It also didn't help that canonically the end of the Burning Crusade and the beginning of Wrath kind of overlapped a little bit, so there wasn't time or thematic space to set up the next expansion. That means that the Burning Crusade had a cool raid, and then it just stopped. No big cinematic. It was just a different era of the game, one where Blizzard had only just began to experiment with machinima-style cinematics to explore their story. So, the Burning Crusade is there, alone on our list. Let's see how the rest match up. Wrath. I mean, come on, what more do I have to say? We've had numerous run-ins with Arthas, the bloody Wrathgate, and all of that old god lore, and all woven together through a big narrative between all the zones. Rarely has there been such an immersive boots-on-the-ground experience, one that culminated with a hell of a patch. 3 dungeons telling a story for either Jaina or Sylvanas, and in those you feel the menace of the Lich King. Icecrown Citadel itself, an incredible raid, and one that managed to have some heart. For a game that, up to this stage, really didn't have much in the way of overt narrative with voiced quests, that scene between Saurfang and Varian was something special. For our final cinematic, they could have done anything, but instead, they got Arthas right, as he lay atop Icecrown, the souls of his many victims escaping, Taranis Menethil appeared. And the full tragedy of the character was paid off when he asked his father if it was over. No king could rule forever, and Arthas was finally gone. Clearly, though, once the helm left his head, something changed. In a moment not unlike Sylvanas' soul torment, I feel Arthas finally felt at least a little bit of the weight of his crimes. Beyond that, the lore of there always being a Lich King, and I remember being there at the time, it did feel out of left field. People were a little confused. Same goes for Bolvar's fate. But it did work well enough, and the sonic cue of Yogg-Saron's theme playing as the Helm of Domination touched the head of Bolvar got many a lore nut thinking for years. Just what was this old god connection? There was a bit of a tease there that was satisfying, but far more importantly, the satisfying character payoff was there, and it was an incredible player experience. I mean, even the fight was cool. And you could say that it's a bit cheap, Tyrion just praying to the light and breaking out of his ice cube, but I feel like that was well earned given what Tyrion the character had went through. The ending of Wrath of the Lich King ranks high, easily topping the Burning Crusade. The final cinematic of Cataclysm was a sad scene of the dragonflights fulfilling their guardianship of the planet, the magic literally vanishing from their eyes. The Age of Dragons is over. Now, it is your job and my job to protect Azeroth. And that was the meta arc of this expansion. The hour of twilight approached, the end times had came, and there was nothing that we could do about it. But all bets were off, because now it's the time of mortals. This really is when the champion, the Mawwalker, when that sort of thing started to kick into gear. Cataclysm felt like an end of an era in itself. The Dragonflights taking a back seat was kind of sad. A new era of the game spurred on by, unfortunately, an incredibly lackluster raid. Cataclysm suffered overall. It was massively ambitious with its revamps. It had at least one raid cut, and potentially more. Now, the final set of dungeons, those were awesome, especially the War of the Ancients. But Dragon Soul, that wasn't really that great, and it certainly did not go down that well at the time. The lore up to this point saw Thrall become more and more central. Less of a figurehead of a faction, and more Green Jesus memes. The cinematic itself, I'll say, was pretty cringe. The lore was also a bit confusing. Was the dragon's purpose apparently to stop themselves? To stop what happens when one of them goes mad? Is that really their purpose? Yeah, and with the weak lore, and I think Deathwing being far more lame than he really could have been, there's just no way Cataclysm tops Wrath of the Lich King. What about TBC? Well, you know what? TBC just kind of stopped. I guess at least Cataclysm had an ending? Mists had heavy themes to wrap up in its finale. And 5.4 was just such a well-motivated patch. From the gripping campaign, the Purge of Dalaran, all of that in 5.1, through to the resolution of the 5.2 faction arc with Jaina and Lorthamar, the War in the Barrens, and finally, that absolutely incredible 5.4 trailer. This was one of the most hype raids from a story perspective. And deliver it did. Great fights, the Claxi lore paid off, Nazgrim sticking to his word. Garrosh sure does look awkward as a big blue blob, but Patrick Seitz' brilliant performance as Garrosh just meant that we felt that character's motivation. So much was achieved in the vocal performance. Just epic, and I think a great final cutscene. From an Alliance point of view, we really see Varian's growth as a leader. He's less the hothead than he'd been in the past, but he's still oozing raw power. An authority, a respectability. It's truly him solidifying himself as a leader that everyone in the Alliance can get behind. The sort that is strong enough to hold that faction together regardless of differing opinions within. On the Horde side, more excellent work. Vol'jin's ascent to War Chief made sense. He'd been a great character through Mists of Pandaria, and after Cataclysm, I think we all know that Thrall really had changed. It wasn't right for him to lead. Ultimately, Garrosh was Thrall's fault. That was a grave error in judgment from Thrall that led to so much death and destruction, and given what we had seen in Wrath of the Lich King, anyone could have saw it coming. Ultimately, it was Thrall's complete dereliction of duty and carelessness with Garrosh that resulted in all this stuff going south. By Mist's end, both factions had been through a lot, finding themselves re-established. If only this status quo with Varian and Vol'jin was to remain. But as we know, a certain Aphrosabi would put an end to that. And purely for what's in-game, Mop has to rank highly. But it's got an awkward problem. The complete ending was in the book, War Crimes. Now, I'm not going to knock Mop too much for that because I think the in-game ending did wrap things up pretty well. But War Crimes should have been in-game. For that, Mop cannot top Wrath, but it absolutely is an expansion where Blizzard started to hit their narrative stride. You know, Warlords of Draenor probably should have been near the top if it went to plan. Instead, we got this abomination of an ending. Forced to accelerate all character arcs beyond the point of plausibility, pulling a Mary Sue on both Grommash and Yrel, it was a mess. Grommash's honorable end could have made sense, it could have been earned, but instead it just felt like the writers liked him, they wanted him to say, Draenor is free and be a good guy, so they made it so. And it felt awful. Nowhere near enough work had been done, and the same goes for Yrel. It was a complete waste of the great setup of 6.0, much as sure many Iron Horde leaders I think were shortchanged. After all the blood of the war, Grommash announces that Draenor is free. So what? He's off scot-free for all that Iron Horde stuff? Trying to invade Azeroth? What? Yrel had a bit, of building Draenor together, rebuilding it. But of course we all know how that ended up going down with the Mag'har, and even at the time it felt implausible because we just hadn't had the narrative to properly close the rift and establish everything the Draenor could and would be in the future. Now, of course, Yrel is essentially Scarlet Crusading the Mag'har. Patch 6.2 gave us a Yrel at the end of an arc that we did not see the middle of. The story pivoted hard after Garrosh's death straight towards setting up the Legion expansion. And it felt iffy, and it meant that the potential of Warlords of Draenor was lost. No Shatrath raid. Killing Archimonde was cool, but Aphrosabi, and I have actually had this leaked to me with receipts, it's basically the whole, one burning legion across all timelines. That's Alex, and I don't think it was mega popular internally at the time. But that made no sense, and it damaged the lore. Another one of his famous, "Trust me bro, no negativity in the dojo" moves. The ending was a mess, the lore felt odd. I guess there was some cool factor. Is it better than Cataclysm? I have to say no. While iffy, Cataclysm at least had its story and saw it through. So Warlords of Draenor sits at the bottom of the pile. But not for long. From the first whisper of demon gods in Warcraft 2 to seeing Titans and Sargeras throw down over our planet, Legion truly was the finale of 2 decades of story. Don't listen to those devs forced to read off PR copy from a teleprompter for Eternity's End. No, Legion was the end of that arc. It was the Metzen arc in its entirety, capped off with a patch zone, a dungeon, a raid, and an absolute monster cinematic. We learned a bit more of the truth of the Titans. We fought our way from the broken shore to Argus, uniting our class halls and pushing the Legion back on every front. There were many lessons. One that stood out, though, was that fate was never in Destiny's hands. That story oscillated between Zira and her dogmatic view of the cosmos and Illidan's crusade to define his own existence. And, never actually get with Tyrande because that's Illidan. Bit sad. What an end it was, though. The spectacle of Argus did not prepare us for the spectacle of Sargeras' first ever full in-game reveal, and Blizzard utterly nailed this. All credit to them. The spectacle was immense. The levels of cool were off the charts. There was strong payoff for the likes of Illidan and Velen, even though Illidan really should have had a scene with Malfurion and Tyrande, but anyway, cool new lore was established. Really, it had it all. And sure, no one here stands up to Arthas as a character. Illidan would have needed a bit more, but this is an MMO. It's about the world. It's about the setting. And in those terms, I am actually willing to place Legion at number 1. It is so close between it and Wrath. I love them both dearly, but goddamn did Legion's End cinematic just give you the greatest slice of Blizzard cheese. A guilty pleasure, but one that made you think, oh shit, things have changed. What does this mean for the Warcraft setting? And I think at the time it was an incredible ending. Of course, though, now we've got to talk about what it actually meant for the Warcraft setting. Where to begin with BFA? A weird thing, multiple expansion themes mashed together, one with 2 endings, an ending to the faction war, an ending for the old gods. The faction war ending? I mean, Saurfang being zapped with Zoval magic? Sylvanas letting slip that she doesn't give a fuck about the Horde, and then just zooming off, Team Rocket style? What? I mean, everything in that cinematic is great, bar, Sylvanas. It's a cinematic that is designed to shock us with a character death and make us question where Sylvanas got this new type of magic from. But ultimately, it meant that Saurfang died with this unsatisfying reveal purely so that Shadowlands stuff could be built. Not worth it. The N'Zoth ending? Oh, we gotta talk about MacGuffins. I mean, a good example of a MacGuffin is Lilu in the 5th Element, right? A MacGuffin and also a character. And that's how you try to make a MacGuffin work, right? Artifact weapons. Yeah, sort of MacGuffins with how they ended the big sword threat, but they had a rich history and a strong fantasy, all rooted in our connection with the game and our class. So, good MacGuffin. The Heart of Azeroth? An annoying grind necklace with no super strong fantasy that lets us shoot a laser beam, causing N'Zoth, one of the greatest looming threats in the setting, to seemingly just die? I mean, out of character on face value, given that he was the sneaky smart old god? Did he not see it coming? Why was the fight so lame? Why was the final cinematic just a palette swap of the fall of Mordor? With this, Blizzard managed to kill fan interest in old gods. I mean, seriously, it plummeted like a goddamn rock. And as much as I still love that shit, I've got to say, we can just look at the viewership stats on old god lore topics across multiple YouTube channels. Of course, we've got the in-depth data for our own channels, and post 8.3, interest is off the cliff. It's gone. People's investment felt betrayed. So the old gods were a bit destroyed for nothing. The promise of Ny'alotha, something that we speculated about since Cataclysm, that was gone, utterly wasted, total letdown. Battle for Azeroth fails on all fronts. To the bottom of the pile, BFA goes, for no expansion ending had killed a slice of the lore that hard, and for so little payoff. But then, bro, hold my beer, says the Shadowlands. Shadowlands isn't over yet. There is always the possibility that the epilogue, which is yet to come, will have a cinematic that will just be perfect, beautiful perfection and somehow will make things work. But that said, most of the A-plot is over. Zovaal has been defeated, and as an ending, this is embarrassing on a scale hitherto unseen. From the point of view of our characters, Zovaal just falls over and turns into a robot, while vaguely monologuing about a spooky thing on the horizon. The cinematic acts more as a plot delivery device, coldly and unemotionally displaying Zovaal's punishment at the hands of his brethren. But we've got no stakes. They're a bunch of robots. Logic has gone out the window. None of them even ask Zovaal what the grand threat is. It just doesn't make sense. There is a glimmer of hope, though, to Nathrius. There's a double meaning to his line, I think, and that is some fun intrigue added to the dynamic. The rest, though, rubbish. Where's the payoff? Where's the catharsis? Yeah, it's nice that Jaina has some right-click dialogue after the Anduin bit, but it would have been nice to have seen the character of Jaina say that, portrayed by Laura Bailey, you know, in a way where we'll feel it a bit more. Just like how in that other MMO, yeah, Alizé can have some beautiful lines just written out, but when the voice actor comes in and performs them, you're like, damn, this is hit. So, as a raid and cinematic goes, Shadowlands is the worst. And tentatively, it's not only going behind the Burning Crusade, which didn't really have an ending, I'm putting it behind Battle for Azeroth. Because while Battle for Azeroth did mangle the old gods, I've got to say, Shadowlands tried to mangle the entire canon of World of Warcraft. So, there's the list. Legion takes the top spot. Wrath of the Lich King, a close second. Mists of Pandaria just behind that. Then Cataclysm, decent bit far down from that. The Burning Crusade, it's got to go somewhere, but to be honest, it's apples to oranges. However, Warlords of Draenor, yeah, did a wee bit of damage to the story, so it's got to go below TBC. And then BFA, which did even more damage to the story. And Shadowlands hasn't ended yet, so I cannot put it on this list. But what I can do is dig its grave. And I'm going to dig its grave at the very bottom of the list. Because it did just kind of butcher 20 years of lore to make the Chockler. And the Chockler kinda sucks. Let's hope the epilogue pulls off a miracle, but I would not hold my breath. Let me know what your personal ranking is down below. I hope you felt that this was interesting, and certainly, if you weren't there, if you weren't playing the game for loads of these expansions, hopefully I was able to give you a wee bit of an insight into how it felt at the time for those of us who were playing. Have a great day. See you next time.